So what we're going to take a look at now is just some React concepts, and if you're already familiar with React, then you can probably just skip this part. But I'll be pretty brief in what we're going to talk about here. And first of all, we're just going to take a look at why React. Why are we using it in this project? And why is it useful to learn React? And one of the reasons to learn React is that big, profitable companies use React. Now, Facebook use React. They're the creators of React. And Facebook is made up of literally thousands of React components. I think something like 50,000 individual components or React components make up the Facebook web application. Also, Airbnb use it for their web application, same as Netflix and same as Instagram. And if big profitable companies are using React, then that suggests it's a useful thing to have in your toolbox of technologies that you know about. Also, developers love React as well. 74.5 responded to the latest Stack Overflow developer survey in 2019 and said that they loved working with React. And because developers love working in React, that means there's a big community of developers working in React. And when it comes to getting help with a particular problem, then if you're using Stack Overflow, then you'll probably get a response to your question back pretty quickly, because the community is so large. Also, React is fast. React uses the concept of a virtual DOM instead of updating the actual DOM directly. Now, the actual DOM is pretty slow, and especially when compared to JavaScript. So React stores a component tree inside this virtual DOM, and whenever a component updates, then it's just this update that's sent to the actual DOM, and it acts as like a patch in the actual DOM. So this keeps our component tree pretty fast, and our updates to the DOM, the actual DOM, pretty minimal, because React is very efficient in what it sends to the actual DOM. It will work out the most efficient way to update the actual DOM from the virtual DOM. Also, React is easy to learn. There's a very small API that we need to learn about in React, and even the ones listed on here, a lot of these are related to a React class component. There's two ways of creating a component in React. One of them is to use a class component, and one of them is simply to use a normal JavaScript function to create our component. Now, we used class components in the past because that gave us access to local states in the component and also lifecycle methods that we see here. Things like what to do when the component mounts and what to do when the component unmounts and when it updates. And also a function to set the state itself, and a function to render the component. But this is not the future of React, and React has introduced React hooks to save us from needing to create class components. So what we'll focus on in the main part of this course is simply React components, which are just JavaScript functions. We'll take a look at JSX, and we'll be using JSX to design and create our component, and we'll talk about JSX soon. But this is what our components are going to be built from. And then in order to access things like state and lifecycle events, then we can use these things called React hooks, which is a very recent introduction to React. And it's designed to save us from needing to create class components and instead just use normal JavaScript functions to create our components. But all of that's coming up. And also, React is just a library. It doesn't come with or has an opinion on how we use forms or validation or make HTTP API calls in our application. It is just a library. And that means it's very small and lightweight. Of course, this has some downsides because it doesn't come with or has an opinion on forms, validation, and HTTP API calls. And as a developer, we're left to our own devices to figure out the best way to implement those kinds of functionalities. But of course, that's something that we're going to cover in this course anyway. And also, it really is just JavaScript. Or in this particular course, we're going to use TypeScript. But TypeScript is really just a superset of JavaScript. So by coding our application in React, we're really just using JavaScript, and we'll get better at using JavaScript by making our application using this technology. So this is just a brief overview of why React, and what we'll talk about next is React components.